It's KZSC Santa Cruz, 88.1 FM. The show is Not So Distant Relatives. I'm LC. And if you're just tuning in, we are talking to the legendary Herb Alpert this afternoon. Herb, thank you so much for calling in and speaking with us today.
It's my pleasure.
You are on tour, or actually the Santa Cruz concert on September 15th at the Rio Theater is kicking off the tour for California. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. We're doing about 50 concerts this year, and I always look forward to starting because, we usually add some new songs or do some things that we haven't done before, so it's exciting for us.
That's fantastic. We can't wait to see you at the Rio Theater. You are about to drop an album in October, the Tijuana Brass Reimagined. Your manager sent me an advanced copy, and I've been listening to it for about the last 2 days, and I'm enjoying it a lot. I'm assuming you'll be playing songs from that as well as some of the old favorites.
Well, it's a real varied program that we have. I'll do a Tijuana Brass medley. My wife, Lani, who's a world-class singer, she was a lead singer with Brazil 66.
Yes.
She'll do a little Brazil 66 medley, and we'll all have a good time. I can't tell you exactly each song we're going to play because it varies from night to night. I try to mix it up so, it doesn't get boring, and then it's fun for us to do.
Absolutely. I'm sure that helps keep the spirits up of everyone that's playing with you. I wanted to ask you about what it was like being Jewish in the music industry and growing up in Los Angeles in a time when the music industry was changing and growing.
Well, that's quite a question. Well, the first thing that I remember seeing in Los Angeles growing up, there was no smog.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's what I remember. I remember when you could see all the mountains around the city every day, so things changed quite a bit. But in terms of growing up in Los Angeles at that time, it was, gee whiz, in the valley, San Fernando Valley, I used to go hunting with a BB gun looking for, I don't know what I was looking for. I never really shot anything, but there was nothing out there. The valley was kind of like a desert. The thing that happened for me is, I got really fortunate in my elementary school. There was a music appreciation class, and they happened to have a table filled with instruments, and I happened to pick up the trumpet. So, that obviously changed my life. But in those days, I'm an introvert, and when I was a kid, I was, very mute. I didn't really talk a lot, but when I started making noise out of the trumpet, it was talking for me. So it was something that really changed my life dramatically. And I've been, working with the Herb Alpert Foundation, trying to make sure that kids have that type of experience at an early age, not necessarily to play the trumpet, but to, express themselves creatively through poetry, through dance, through painting, sculpting. It doesn't really matter. But I think by doing that, kids get a feeling of, their own uniqueness. And hopefully, because they can experience their own uniqueness, they can learn to appreciate other people's uniqueness. And I think we need a lot more of that.
I agree. And in my research, as I was looking at a few things about you, about your donation to LA City College, that I believe started in the fall of last year, of 2017, that all music majors at the school at LA City College would have a tuition-free education. I just thought that was something that has a direct impact on the students and the future of music students in a time where the arts has really been pushed to the back burner in favor of some important things as well in terms of the STEM program.
So it's actually, it's a little bit different than what you just said. What we did and what we are doing is we are giving kids or maybe young adults or adults an opportunity to go to LACC who don't have that, who didn't have that opportunity before. So if they have, the wherewithal and the desire to go to a community college like LACC, we're going to help them do that. And then, of course, it's a 2-year program, and if they put in the time and put in the work, they can hopefully transition into a major university.
That's fantastic. Yes. I wanted to also ask you, I'm kind of jumping around here.
No, it's a little bit different because I'm not as old as you think you are. that you think I am. Because, see, I go by the adage, there was this great baseball player by the name of Satchel Paige, and he always used to say, how old would you be if you didn't know how old you was?
Yes.
And so, like, I'm 53. I don't know how old you think I am.
Of course. Well, I'm 29, so
Okay.
sure. What appealed to you when you first went to Mexico and heard mariachis? And what made you make the connection to start going down that road and create the Tijuana Brass?
Okay, so I never heard mariachi music. I used to go to the bullfight for about 3 years in a row during the springtime in Tijuana, and I got kind of excited about that whole event. I mean, I can't say that I love bullfighting anymore, but at that time, there was a brass band in the stands, and they were announcing, each individual event, like they'd come out, they'd stand up and play ba-da, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and the bull would charge out of the gates. And then they would, do these various fanfares that it was very exciting. And then one afternoon I got a chance to see the famous rejoneador, Carlos Arusa, fighting on horseback, came out on a white horse, never touched the horse with his hands, the reins with his hands. He had the reins around his waist, and he would, like, by the motion of his body, would move around the arena and put the bandoleros into the bull and do whatever he had to do. And then he'd put his horse away and walk right across the arena to get his cape and his sword, and he'd never look at the bull. The bull would be like probably about 5 feet away from him as he was staring into the stands. And it was a kind of a thrilling thing to watch. So I tried to reflect on those afternoons, and that's how I came up with this Lonely Bull idea, the concept of my feelings in Tijuana in those days. And it was a fortunate thing that happened. I did the first recording before it was released. I played it for a disc jockey friend of mine. He heard it and he said, "Well, where's the hook? You need a hook." I said, "What do you mean a hook? This is an instrumental music song." He says, "You need a hook. You got to get people interested." So I had a real fortunate thing that happened. I called a friend of mine who was the head engineer at one of the major record companies who had a stockpile of various sounds and things. I said, "Do you have anything that has to do with a bullfight?" And he happened to have a tape of 30,000 people screaming "Olé," and loaned it to me, and I put that right in the front of the Lonely Bull record when I did the fanfare. But that came on, and all of a sudden that made that record take off like a rocket ship. So that was the start of my career as a recording artist, and it was the start of A&amp Records. That was the first record we released.
I was just going to ask you about that. What was the impetus for starting the record company? Was there a thought that you wanted to be more independent and not necessarily have to fall under the strict guidance of other labels?
Well, that's a good question. It'd be a long answer, but the short answer would be we didn't plan on starting a record company. We just planned on releasing one record. That was it. There were a lot of companies in that particular time zone, 1962. There were people, were releasing one record. They had no offices. They were just releasing records out of the trunks of their car. That was their office. And when the Lonely Bull hit, our distributors that we finally got together, they wanted to have a Lonely Bull album, so we did that, and that sold really well, and we had some money. Our distributors gave us the great advice. He says, "Why don't you guys just take the money and run?" And that was kind of got our challenge up, and we decided to reinvest it and did some more Tijuana Brass recordings, and they sold, and so we had enough money to really start a company, so we decided to hold on to it.
And the rest is history,
and
literally.
We got lucky. It's all about timing. You got to be at the right place at the right time, and if you're prepared, then you can walk through the door. And when that record hit, I was prepared. I've been playing trumpet since I was 8 years old, and I was playing professionally, and I knew what to do once that record happened. I had a great advantage there. And then I got a letter from a lady. This is interesting. I got a letter from a lady when this record was top 10 in the country. I got a letter from a lady in Germany who said, "Dear Mr. Alpert, thank you for taking me on this vicarious trip to Tijuana." And I thought, man, that's really pretty magical, because that music was so visual for her that it transported her, several thousand miles. So I said, that's the type of music I want to make. I want to make music that takes you someplace.
Absolutely. One of the reasons I got into being a DJ is that music is a journey, and music is the great equalizer across physical boundaries and borders, races and ethnicities and generations.
Seriously, I think musicians and artists are healers, in the sense that, when you really get onto somebody's music or their art, their sculpture, their painting, it takes you someplace. It makes you feel different than what your everyday life is generally like. I don't know. The reason I like to perform and like to make music and paint and sculpt, I'm in the exact moment of my life when I'm doing that, and that's what I love about it.
I really like that, the exact moment of your life. That's a good segue also into talking about your artwork. That was one thing about you that I did not know.
I've been doing it for almost 50 years now, so I'm not doing it as a hobby. I'm doing it as somebody who just lives and breathes it. I'm a right-brain guy. I spend most of my time thinking about music and thinking about painting and sculpting, and that's pretty much where I live. I've been doing it professionally for several years. I have worked in museums, and I've had shows in different parts of the country and Europe. So it's something that just gives me pleasure. I really believe in the arts. I think the arts are an important ingredient. It's what defines us as a country and as a city.
I agree. Very much so. Do you ever bring some of your artwork to show during a tour, or is that just
you'll see a lot of my work. During the show, we have a screen that'll show the paintings and sculptures, and it's not as an advertisement. It's just something as an adjunct to what we do, and the tunes that we choose. There's a selected painting that goes along with the song.
Oh, that's lovely. I'm really excited to see that. Do you ever bring any of your pieces physically, or is that just too much?
Oh, no. We just, last week we had a show in St. Louis. There was an art show one night, and the next night was a concert. And then we flew to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and had the same thing. Art show at a beautiful gallery there. And then the next night was a performance.
Well, we have a couple of museums here in Santa Cruz that I think would be honored to show your work. So something to think about for the future.
They should take a look at it.
Definitely.
Everybody has their own opinion on what art is. That's what's so beautiful about it. Some people, you can go in front of a painting or a sculpture, and 10 people will say, "Why is that there?" and another 10 people will say, "That's magnificent." So, it's all up to the individual. That's what's beautiful about it. You get to like what touches you.
Right, and the same with music too. It can be interpreted in many different ways. It's very subjective, but in a good way. It gives people an opportunity to really tap into what they're feeling and what it elicits in them.
Well, this is exactly a very good point that you just made. I think a lot of people get too intellectual about art. They want to know what are they trying to say? What is the big deal? What's that painting about? You don't need to know. It's it either touches you or it doesn't. And if it doesn't touch you, so what? It's okay too.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree. I worked at the Museum of Modern Art in San Francisco just as it was reopening to the public after being closed for 3 years while they majorly renovated the space. And I was on the visitor experience team, so I'd be on the floor a lot listening to patrons, and I'd often hear people saying, well, I don't understand. What is he trying to say? And I would think to myself, and sometimes I'd sidle up to people and say, well, it's really whatever you want it to be. And I think that we tend to get a little stuck in artwork and then translating to music, stuck into genres. And it's one of the things that I've always loved about your music is that it's genreless. It spans so many different feelings and styles. One of the albums that I have in my personal collection is the Re-Whipped album that takes the whipped cream and other delights and puts a different spin on them. And a couple of the tracks in particular, the one that you did with Ozo Motley is one of my favorites. And so I love the reinterpretation in that collection, and I've been listening to the reimagined album that is coming out in a few months. Again, from a different perspective. It's like reading a book again, where you get something out of it that maybe you didn't get before. And I really...
Yeah, I'll tell you, that's interesting you're saying that. You know, if you want to just listen to one thing that is maybe not as upbeat as I usually am, because I try to make music that's super positive and uplifting. But on the album that you just mentioned, that's the reimagined album, I did a version of America. Now, that's a song that's pretty much, it's usually heard in a very fast way. It was from West Side Story, and it's a story about the Puerto Rican transition into the United States. And because of the way I believe we mistreated the people when they were in dire straits with the terrible things that happened last year, I took that song and did it as a ballad, more as a slow, this is what's happening, this is what happened to those people. Because when you listen to the actual lyric of America, it's a negative lyric. It's about how the Puerto Ricans had a strange time trying to transition into our country here with their accent or whatever else, all the other things that people get hung up on. So
I really applaud you for speaking your mind through music, and that, again, as we said at the beginning, it's the great equalizer, and music is a way, I think, for a lot of people to, well, certainly for artists writing songs and singing songs, to get out a message that maybe wouldn't be heard otherwise.
I think what we need in this whole world right now, we need an ethical revolution. We need to get people back on the human part of life.
Absolutely.
My wife just walked in the door here, and she's wondering whether she was going to talk to you.
I would love to talk with her. Yes, if she's up for it. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to talk to her.
That's my angel.
Yes.
She's an angel. She changed my life, this girl. Lani and I have been married for 44 years. I auditioned Sergio Mendes in Brazil 66 in 1966. That's when we signed them to A&amp Records. And we were just friends. Well, we were not just friends. I had just met her when we auditioned them. And then we became friends after we signed Sergio and the group to a contract at A&M, and I produced the first few records, and they started playing with us, and we became friends, and here she is.
Hi.
Hi, Lani.
Hi, Lani. How you doing? Okay, Louisa, thank you so much. Good luck to you.
Thank you, Herb. We'll see you at the show in a few weeks.
Look forward to it.
Okay.
Have a good time.
Thank you. This is KZSC Santa Cruz, 88.1 FM. The show is Not So Distant Relatives. I'm LC. And if you're just tuning in, we've been talking with the legendary Herb Alpert and have the amazing honor of speaking with Lani Hall, his beautiful wife and singer, songwriter, composer, artist, arranger in her very own right, Grammy-winning, best known as the lead singer for Brazil 66 with Sergio Mendes for many years, as well as singing the title song to the James Bond film, Never Say Never Again. Good afternoon, Lani. Thank you so much for chatting with us today.
Hi, Louisa. How you doing?
I'm doing very, very well. I was talking with Herb earlier about the fact that I grew up in a household full of music, and two of the records that were a staple of my childhood were Edie Gourmet with Los Panchos and the Look Around album from Sergio Mendes and Brazil 66. Those two records got so much airplay at our house. And not only were both the album covers just so iconic, but the music and the tunes. I mean, Herb and I were talking about a woman who had written him once from Germany to say, thank you for taking me on a journey to Tijuana.
Yeah, right.
I'm transported back to my childhood home and dancing with my father in the living room when I listen to the Look Around album and Edie Gourmet.
That's the power of music.
Absolutely. It's the great equalizer.
Transports you.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
lifts you or plunges you.
Exactly. Yeah. And plunges you isn't always a bad thing. I mean,
No, not at all. I mean, most singers love singing sad ballads.
Yes.
You know,
so I am so curious about your knowledge of Portuguese in particular. I speak Spanish fluently.
I don't speak Portuguese. I hate to say that to you, but I don't speak Portuguese and I don't speak Spanish.
Well, nobody would know it from listening to your accent.
I love to sing in Portuguese. I do. I love to sing in Portuguese. It's my favorite, actually.
What is your process?
It's got such rhythm.
It does. Oh, my goodness.
Oh, yeah.
It's such a beautiful language.
It is and it sings so beautifully.
It does. Oh, yeah. It just makes my heart soar. What is your process then when you're learning a song?
Phonetics.
Okay, that makes total sense.
And I especially work with people that speak that language.
Right.
So I get the actual pronunciation, and I just work on it because I want to sound authentic. And fortunately, I have the ear for it.
Right.
So it worked out.
Well, you absolutely do sound authentic. I mean, for a very long time,
good.
I didn't know that you weren't Brazilian. I mean, that, and I'm sure I'm not the only person to say that to you.
No,
but
I mean, when I went to Brazil for the first time, people were speaking to me in Portuguese. I mean, they just knew that I spoke Portuguese.
Right, right.
And I would look at them and do, sorry, but,
Yeah. Definitely. Well, I love the story about how Sergio found you. That he must, just that it was professional love at first sight, and I'm also, again, just so enamored with the fact that he saw your potential, not being Brazilian, not speaking the language, and how did that come about? I just think that that's such a great melding of brains, for lack of a better word.
Well, he came to a show that I was doing, and so he saw a whole show, and he was putting a group together again. His group was splitting up. It was called Brazil 65, and it was splitting up, and they were all going back to Brazil. But Sergio wanted to try one more time to put a group together, and this time he decided to use a couple of Americans.
Wow.
So he heard about me because he was playing on the same street I was playing on, and he heard about me. So between his sets, he came over to see my show, and between my sets, I went over to see his, and he came up to me after my show and said, I'm putting a group together. I'm calling it Brazil 66, and I would love to have you be the lead singer.
Wow.
And I said, you'll have to ask my father, because I had no idea what that meant. And
right.
He came over to our apartment, and he asked my father.
Almost
And
like
my
for your
father
hand in marriage.
reluctantly, said, okay, but he looked at me and said, if you ever have any trouble whatsoever, you hop on a plane and come home.
Mm-hmm. Well, you were a, quote unquote child bride, I'm sure. So, how exciting that.
Yeah, that was
Wow.
very exciting. I mean, when I went over to his show, I was stunned at that was the music that I had liked so much when I heard Stan Getz, when I
Yes.
heard his album, with Astrud Gilberto, with the girl from Ipanema, and all that in 1962. And I hadn't heard that sound again until I stood in that club and listened to Sergio. So when I heard what that music was, I looked at the person I came with and I said, "Oh my God, that's that music that I love."
Right.
So I followed the music. That's really what I did. I really wanted to sing that music. I just had a feeling for it, and it was a wonderful move, I think, on my part. That it brought my life, it changed my life, gave me a new life.
It absolutely comes through in your voice when one listens to those songs and hears you singing. When you collaborate with other artists, what usually happens? Do you approach them? Do they approach you? Is it kind of a back and forth?
Well, as far as when I think about my career, I did a lot of duets with in my Latin career when I was singing in Spanish. I did duets with Jose Feliciano and Roberto Carlos and Jose and Camilo Sesto. So I did these duets with them, and the reason I did them was because the producer of those albums put that together. That was his idea.
Right.
He said, "Well, if we're going to do an album with you, I'd like to pull in some other talent too,
Right.
and let's see what we can create." And I did not know these. I knew Roberto Carlos because he's Brazilian. And I knew Jose Feliciano also.
Right.
But I didn't know Camilo Sesto or Jose, and wonderful composer Juan Carlos Calderon wrote the first album that I did, and I did with Jose that song Te Quiero Así, and it was very successful. So the next album, they wanted to do another ballad. They wanted to do another duet, and so he called Camilo Sesto. So I really had nothing to do with putting that together. Once it was together, and once these artists said they would like to do that, then we worked together musically. But the initial get together was not my idea at all.
Right. Do you have any thoughts about people that you would like to work with and maybe reach out to in the future?
I actually don't. No, I really can't think of. If I work with somebody, I want it to be a meaningful. I want it to be meaningful. So, and I want to bring something to it. So I don't really know. I really never think about. I think about working with musicians.
Right.
I don't really think about working with other singers.
Right.
And I think it's because, I sing in Portuguese, and, unless somebody else sang in Portuguese, then maybe we could do something together.
Right.
But, I sing in English also, and Spanish, and I've done those duets, a lot of duets in Spanish, so I don't know. I really haven't thought about that.
Maybe it'll happen organically at some point.
Yeah.
Well,
My husband, that's the one I would do it with.
I was
my
going to
husband.
say, yes,
Yeah.
you have a pretty successful duet going with Herb, both musically and otherwise.
Oh, absolutely. And in the drop of a hat, I would do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Who approached you to sing the title song to Never Say Never Again?
Sergio.
Really? Oh,
yeah.
Interesting.
Yes, it was very interesting.
Oh,
he
wow.
Thought when he heard it, the Bergmans, Marilyn and Alan Bergman, wrote the lyric to it, and they brought it to Sergio. And when he heard it, he said, I think Lani would sound great on this. And so they called, and we ended up going into the studio, and Sergio and Herb produced it together.
Wow.
And that was the first time that we had worked together since I had left the group, because I think that was in 1983 or something. And
yes, it was
Never
1983.
Say Never.
Yes.
Yeah, 1983, and I left the group in 1971.
Wow.
So I was gone already for 12 years. Yeah.
A super cool story.
Yeah.
Oh, I think I have one last question because I've already taken up a bunch of your time today.
That's okay.
I know that you had to take a very long break for a while you were sick. Did you always want to return to performing, or?
Well, I always wanted to sing. I always want to sing. So, that's the way I get my feelings out. Writing and singing, I get my feelings out. And so not being able to do that, just because I was so exhausted all the time, was really sad for me. It was a sad time. And I tried to make the most of it, but it just took so long. And I just kept trying to do things to make myself feel better. But there wasn't a whole lot to do. It was, this Epstein-Barr virus thing called, and also called chronic fatigue syndrome.
Yes.
It was really something I had never experienced before. It was a real mystery to me, and I just had to ride it through.
I can imagine.
That's what I did, and it took a long time. I still feel it sometimes. I don't think my energy ever really completely came back. At least I could sing now.
Yes. That must have been so incredibly frustrating.
It was just sad. I missed singing. I missed the interaction. I missed musicians, working with musicians. And I felt like the first time I was with musicians was really when I joined Brazil 66. And I remember feeling, this is where I belong. And I had never felt that way before. Mm-hmm. And I knew that this was it. This is what I pulse to. This is what I want. This is what I want from my life. And I couldn't do that all of a sudden. I couldn't do that anymore. Yeah. So it was, I felt, kind of out of place.
I'm very glad that you were able to find your way back to it again.
Thank you, yes. So am I. Thank you.
Definitely. I so appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today. Lani Hall, thank you so much for talking with us this afternoon on Not So Distant Relatives. It has been an absolute pleasure.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you, Louisa.
Thank you. Lani Hall and Herb Alpert coming to the Rio Theater here in Santa Cruz on September 15th, brought to you by one of our loyal and longtime sponsors here at KZSC, the Kuumbwa Jazz Center. Information is available at kzsc.fm/Kuumbwa, KUUMBWA, and we cannot wait to see you at the Rio Theater, Lani.
Great.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.